We're talking parent engagement, and I thought the best way to probably gain the most insight from Dr. Pushor is to ask her some very pertinent questions. So this is going to be somewhat of an interview style presentation. And we'll start with the first question. Oh, sorry. Yes, let me introduce ourselves. My problem. Dr. Debbie Pushor is a mother of 3 adult sons. Oh, all boys, that's tough. Cohen, Quinn, Tikwa.
Just Teague, like league, but with a T. Yeah.
And a former public school teacher, consultant, principal, and central services administrator. She currently works as a professor in the Department of Curriculum Studies at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. Dr. Debbie Pushor is recognized as one of Canada's leading experts in parent engagement.
Thank you.
And my name is Theresa Pastore. I have 2 adult children, Nicholas and Theresa. And I've been a parent engagement specialist who's volunteered for more than 25 years. Don't calculate that in your head. I'm old. Theresa, I received my certificate in family engagement and education from Harvard in 2018, and I'm the founder and executive director of Parents Engaged in Education. So I'm going to start with the first question. Dr. Pushor, what do you think the biggest challenges will be for school leaders to increase parent engagement during COVID-19?
That's such a big question, such an important one, Theresa. Thank you so much for having me here to chat with you about some of these kinds of things. I guess, I had read a tweet, back when COVID was kind of in the midst of school closures, before the end of June last year. And someone had noted that schools who had high parent engagement, strong parent engagement prior to COVID, remote learning, the closure of schools, had increased their engagement. Schools that had low engagement prior to being closed and moving to a remote format had a broader gap between themselves and their parent body. So I think just to use it as a context to answer your question, what's so important is, number one, school leaders have to understand parent engagement, believe in it, support it. And then I think they're in a good position to look at strategies and so on. But I think the first challenge is that they've made a commitment to working closely with parents and to engage them in meaningful and authentic ways in their children's learning. So with COVID, I think what's really critical is that they use a diversity of approaches. We know that some children are back in school face-to-face in school buildings during the day. Other children are learning remotely or from a distance, and we have blended and hybrid models in there as well. So there isn't any right answer about what we should do or could do, but we're going to need, I think, a multiplicity of approaches to this important work. So my advice is always start by asking parents, right? What are the kinds of things that would help you engage in your child's learning, whether it's in school or out of school? So often we sit together and try and brainstorm and think of great answers to some of the puzzling questions, and we don't ask parents. So I'd really recommend that there's a survey, that something goes out to parents to say to them, what is it you want? What is it you need? What kinds of things will support you? And that could be an online survey, but one of the things that I find too is a community canvas is always a really wonderful strategy. So how might we go door to door, wearing masks, socially distancing, and making contact with families, letting them know they matter to us, that their voices are important, and making that human connection. We've had some great luck with that here in Saskatoon, dividing into teams or pairs and canvassing our community. So that's important. I think we have to think about the demographics of a school population as well. I was working at Scott Collegiate, a secondary school in Regina, and students there, some of them are parented by their own parents, and often those parents are younger parents. some of them were being parented by their grandparents.
Mhm.
And so grandparents were saying, we want you to phone us, pick up the phone and call. And the younger parents who were more savvy with technology said, use social media, use Facebook, use the things that we're using already. So it just tells us that we have to be diverse. And I guess I think about with students, we always program for student differences. We're accommodating, we're diversifying our approach. Yet when it comes to parents, we often use one size fits all strategy. And it's time to throw that out. We know that's not effective. So how do we begin to use a multitude of ways to address some of the barriers? So Theresa, I don't know if that hits at some of the things you've been experiencing in Ontario as well, but.
Yeah, and I think, part of the issue also is what I think was surprising to some of the people here when virtual learning became an option was that there was the assumption more affluent communities would go online and choose virtual, and the lower income marginalized communities would choose in person. And in fact, the opposite has been true. And so it is a big challenge because history will tell us that parents in low income communities may not appear to be as engaged.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean they're not engaged.
Exactly.
It's our perception they're not engaged. And often that's because we base our definition of parent engagement on our own experience.
Yeah.
So if we assume that parent engagement is because they come to every event, they ask a lot of good questions, they, do all this, that means they're engaged because that's our view.
Yeah.
There's many parents at home working 3 jobs,
Yeah.
with 4 or 5 kids in a low income situation who are struggling to be engaged and they want to be. I mean, I've always started with the premise that every parent wants their child to succeed.
I absolutely believe that too.
And I think if we as a school community can embrace that assumption first, if we can start there, that every parent wants their child to succeed. And then, like you say, we look at the different ways we support children and try to use a differential approach to education. We should be looking at that approach too, to engaging families.
Yeah.
Not just parents, but there's grandparents, there's older siblings who are, in charge of their younger siblings. There may be an important uncle who really plays the role of a father in the family. So I do think that that's one of the challenges, and definitely COVID has increased that challenge. But I see it as a new opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
An opportunity to redirect our thinking. And I love the idea of going door to door because we just assume if people, don't answer a survey online or they don't respond to, a posting in the Facebook page asking for information or whatever, that they're not engaged. When in fact, they may never have gone on a computer before.
Right.
So I love that idea of, using maybe parent leaders to reach out and try to get to these families and really find out how can we engage and support them in their journey to support their child.
Yeah. And there's a notion, and you've spoken about it so beautifully, Theresa. Michael Lawson wrote, it was about 2003, I believe, he wrote about school-centric thinking. And that's what's happening here. It's just exactly as you described it. We count bodies at meetings, right? We look at parents who come to the school landscape, and those are typically the parents who can afford childcare, transportation, and don't have those other barriers, like you said, when you're working multiple jobs or working shift work. And so it's really a time, and I hope that COVID will help push us in that direction, to move away from putting the school at the center and that serving of the school's agenda, and instead moving to a family-centric way of thinking and say, what do families need and want, and how do we best meet those needs. And that's exactly like you said, then when we move to homes, when we stop at doorways, we learn how engaged parents are. It's not in the ways that have typically counted. And then the other, yeah, so I mean, I think it's just, William Jane's work comes to mind too, where he says, when we look at what we count for parent engagement and what actually is shown in the research to make a difference, it's the kinds of things parents are doing when they talk to kids about what they want to be when they grow up, and they tell them that education is important and we want you to do well. It isn't attending the meetings. It isn't asking those questions. So the parents who are really impacting their kids' achievement are the ones who are engaged with their kids in their own environment. So there's a real shift that has to happen in what we value, what we count, and then how we work to engage because of those things, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think COVID has just highlighted the sort of traditional way we've always looked at parent engagement. And, you know, there's not too many good things that have come out of COVID, I would say. But I would say the chance to see this in a new perspective is an important opportunity that has been created by this crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always good, right? We just have to dwell on the positives and be strength-based, right?
Yes, in this one we have to dig deep, but we can find some positives. And I think parent engagement is one where, if nothing else, we can explore new ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Adrienne, you want to move to the next slide? What are the biggest opportunities that virtual outreach will present to those in school councils with respect to making sure that every parent or caregiver is engaged in their children's education at home?
I mean, there are things that virtual outreach present that sometimes for some families do decrease barriers. So given that they have access to a device or of some kind, when we move to virtual opportunities for presentations or engagement, what we are doing is removing some of those barriers of needing childcare, of needing transportation, of having to have the time that it takes to move from home to school, etc. So some of the things that we just identified, time, money, and those other barriers, virtual, when you can be in your own home, holding your baby, getting your kids dinner at the same time that you're engaging, can be a positive. I had done a session for Thames Valley District School Board in, I think that was late May, and they were really thrilled with the enrollment of parents. So the virtual did give access to people that maybe wouldn't have been there in person. They were finding their numbers were higher. So I think that's a good thing. I think too, some of the platforms we use have some really lovely features where you can use closed captioning, or you can use things like either an interpretation function or have interpreters online too. I was doing something for Nevada State Department of Ed on Saturday last week, and interpreters joined the session so they could, they could translate as I spoke. And I think that we have the technology when we're virtual to be able to make some things happen that we couldn't otherwise. So I mean, I certainly see that as a possibility. I think that maybe, again, we were talking about the switch in thinking. When you go into a virtual space and you're in a new platform, it's a really good time to shift up what you're doing. It's already new, it's already different. So instead of holding our school council meeting, following Robert's rules, having people make motions and second them, and again, privileging people with education and confidence, maybe it's an invitation to do things differently. So a lot of these platforms, you can use a poll, you can have people type in chat, you can put people into breakout rooms. There's all kinds of things that increase the engagement of the broader group who's in the meeting, as opposed to how we typically do a meeting. So I think it's a really good time for us to say, why do we use the meeting format we do? And what could we do differently?
And I really like that idea. And I really think that that's something that I would love to see school boards embrace
Mm,
and help their school councils make this transition. Because when I look on Facebook and other things, there's millions of questions that are just repeated over and over
yeah,
about how best to do this. How, okay, we were provided with, a Zoom license, but how do we run our meeting? How do we engage with parents? I hope that school boards will come along with that type of training, and it's something we're looking into in terms of training as well,
nice.
as really like giving tools for them, not to leave it up to individuals to have to research and find out. Because in my experience, and this is one of the reasons that I actually got involved in parent engagement, is because when I became a school council chair, I
Mhm.
found out that it was up to me to do hours and hours and hours and hours of research.
Yeah,
And back in the day, way back when, there wasn't as much online availability as there is now.
right.
And I thought, I'm wasting all this time just learning what the rules are to be a school council chair, what
Mhm.
I have to do, how I do it, what the law is, all that. And then researching topics to bring to my council and things like that. And that was sort of, how Parents Engage in Education was born, is through my experience of doing that.
Yeah,
My goal was to create an organization that actually provides a lot of that.
yeah.
You don't have to do all this research. And that's what I would really like to see boards doing, and organizations like ours working on, is being able to push that information out, give the parent councils the tools they need
Yeah.
to be able to engage in this very difficult time, because we don't have 3 years for everybody to go to courses and,
Yeah.
learn a bunch of stuff on their own. We're in a short time frame, and we need to be able to roll those tools out very quickly.
Well, and I think there was when, with school councils, there was such an emphasis on governance,
Mhm.
right? And I think that school councils got this message that they were required to work in certain ways, when in fact that isn't the case. That once a council is formed, they can work in all kinds of ways. So we know with our Indigenous individuals, Indigenous groups, they work in a talking circle.
Mhm.
And so when I was doing some work at Princess Alexandra Community School, a school that's 90+% Indigenous, they ran their school council as a talking circle. And so instead of having that formalized agenda with someone in control of it, they went around the circle and everybody had a voice and an opportunity. And I think again, when we're connected to schools and teachers have such strong repertoires of instructional strategies, why aren't we spending time learning some of those strategies to use with our parents as well? So an example, Ted Ament, he did his doctorate on a critical analysis of school community councils here in Saskatchewan. And he was presenting to my students this summer remotely. We were all online, but he used a traveling brainstorm strategy, just as one example. And it's the kind of thing we could do beautifully in a school council meeting. So he had 5 or 6 questions. We created a Google document with all of those questions. We put people in breakout groups, and we said, okay, this group start with question 1, second group start with question 2, and so on. We gave them a color of ink to work in so we knew where responses were coming from. They had 5 or 6 minutes to discuss a question in their breakout group virtually. And then we said, okay, now move to the next question. So because the Google Doc was growing as people wrote, then my group could say, what did Theresa's group write? And then we could respond to your thinking, add to it. Maybe we might disagree with it, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's a beautiful strategy that gives voice, that allows you to explore things in depth, and could easily be done as the structure for a council meeting, right? We don't have to be tied to this select group of people who get to speak and others who come to listen, because they're only going to come and listen a couple times and then they're not coming back, right?
That is so true. I mean, people say to me, well, people come for the first 2 meetings and they don't come back. And I said, then you're not offering them value.
Yeah, there isn't a reason for them to come back, right?
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was, people said, well, how were you successful? I said, I was successful because I sat down before every meeting and thought, what am I offering the people who are taking this time to participate? What are they going to walk home with? And that was always important to me, to have something at every meeting that people walked out and said, either I learned something today, I contributed to the conversation today, or I made social connections in the school community today. And I think that's really important. And I think right now, while we're looking at this virtual world, maybe we can look at kids who are not fully engaged online in virtual ways, and realize that there's every possibility their parents are not, right? So maybe we use that as a jumping off point of when we want to start approaching parents about parent engagement, maybe we can use that as, sort of our first priority to be approaching.
Yeah, I just think that, yeah, exactly. Why would I come back if I had no purpose in being there or didn't get anything out of the meeting? And so I think, again, we just really have to say, how do we give voice and place to every single person in the room, every single meeting? And I think, like I said, when we start to move into these platforms and we can't do things the way we did before, it's a perfect opportunity to let go of the old, to unlearn what we've been doing, and to learn some new strategies. And I do think it's the responsibility of our school divisions and our organizations to support parents to know that that's possible, and then, some training in order to be able to do it, right?
Because I do think, like you talk about doing a Google Doc and breakout sessions and things, these are things I think we need to be training our school councils on right away so they can operate in this platform. Because many people, I'm sure there's school council people on here today going, well, that's great, but like I can barely join a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So they need these tools and resources.
Yeah, exactly. And you could take a couple of meetings just playing with the tools. Like if you've decided you're using Zoom, or you've decided whatever platform you're going to use, then just having parents come online and just play with it, where there isn't a meeting agenda, but just an opportunity to start to experience it and learn together and try some things out, without saying we've got to get our meeting going, right? But building relationships and spending time actually learning together. Yeah.
I think also that breaks so many barriers, right? Coming on and saying, yes, I don't have a lot of experience in this. We are learning as we go, and here we are, we're learning together, I think that's actually a very welcoming approach.
Yeah, I think our own vulnerability is welcoming, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Theresa.
Yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that people will relax the minute you say that. Because often it's like, I don't want to talk, I don't want to be seen, I don't know what I'm talking about, so I think it's really good if we can start getting those resources and tools together to help school councils.
Yeah, I think there's some really good work that could happen there, and it would be a super investment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Adrienne, we'll move on. Are there any tips you can provide to help school councils engage with diverse families to be sure the council best represents the makeup of the student body?
Yeah.
And as a second part of the question, can you identify the benefits of having a diverse council?
Yeah. I think that if we're going to invite diverse parents and family members into our school councils, we need to do it personally. We need to shoulder tap. We need to build relationships and make connections. Like we were just saying, it's kind of a scary body. often feels like there's an inner circle of powerful parents, and we don't always see ourselves as being part of that group. We're not connected in the same way. So I think we go to parents, we look at the elements of our community. We have a high Syrian population, we have a high Bangladeshi population, we have a high Indigenous population, whatever cultural mix you have, and say who within there is confident, might be well known and well respected, and let me go there first. So I come to you, Theresa, and I say, can you have coffee with me? Do you have time? Do it virtually if you aren't comfortable, but just say, can we talk about it? I want you to know what school council does and why it's important. And you may not have experienced it before, but I think it's that personal invitation. It's the shoulder tapping. It's saying you are important and you have a voice that we need to learn from. And then you encourage that person to come with a partner, to come with a friend, to come with 2 or 3 friends. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves as an outsider in the meeting, and they're not going to want to come back. So I really think that invitation, that warmth, that hospitality, saying why, what's the school council about, and why is it important, and why would it be a good investment of time for you? I mean, I think all of that's important. And then I think when they do come, what are the protocols? So if you are having a meeting face-to-face but socially distanced and you're having snacks or something, have you thought about the people that are there? Are your snacks halal, right? Have you thought about your protocols in terms of maybe if you have a high Indigenous population, there's a prayer by an elder, or you smudge before the meeting begins, or you move in a circle of the sun the way Indigenous people do, right? Do you understand that with Muslim people that women shake hands or touch, but we don't shake hands across gender, right? What are the kinds of things that we need to own and know so that when the individuals that we've invited arrive, they feel at ease, they feel welcomed, they feel valued, that people care they're there. I think that's a critical piece. And then how do we slow our meetings down? I'm a newcomer from Syria, and you're talking with acronyms or vocabulary, educational language. I've never heard, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I'm lost. Well, I'm not coming back then either. So how do we check in with that person all the way through and saying, does this make sense? What background do you need? Let's explain where this came from, and so on, right? So we can't just expect them to arrive and to absorb it all and to be perfectly comfortable, right? So I think there's, we just have to be really cognizant then we've asked them to be there. So how will we welcome them and include them once they're there? And then, like with any good situation, how do we thank them afterwards? To make that phone call, to write that handwritten card and say, Aisha, your presence made such a difference tonight. I'm so thankful you came. What was the experience like for you? What did you understand? What didn't you? Did you feel comfortable and welcome? What could we do differently? Right? I mean, there is a whole process, not just getting people to a meeting, but what happens during, what happens after, and that whole kind of expansion of relationships. So, how is your community, how is your school council building community, building connection? Do you begin with introductions, and do you do things that help people know one another? And what are you doing to really have the community connect? I mean, I would ask a lot of questions about those kinds of things as well.
Some of the things I valued most in building a diverse council was inviting their input and experience that they brought with them from the homeland.
Yeah.
And we got some tremendous ideas on things that they had done that we could easily do. that would make a big difference.
Mhm.
I think that also we have to all learn to be better listeners.
Oh,
I
yes,
think,
that's
we
a great point.
in counselors, my experience in counselors often is that, voices get stifled because either they get, well, we don't do that. We've tried that before. That won't work here. We don't sit and really listen
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
person. When we
Mhm.
say every voice should be heard, people go, yeah, no, we know that. Everybody should have a right to talk. Well, there's a difference between having a right to talk and having the room listen to your input.
Mhm.
And when
Mhm.
people feel listened to,
Mhm.
they'll come back.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If
And
they-
when they see you doing something with the information that you've shared with them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
then too, one of the questions has to be, would you would you connect with some of your kids' schoolmates and their families and ask them to attend a meeting? If
Yeah.
they say no, you haven't done your job to welcome that parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you need to explore, well, why wouldn't you
Yeah.
want to, engage with others and invite them? Because that'll be your telltale of what maybe you should learn from
Yeah.
your interaction.
Well, and I think so often we go right to the agenda of the meeting, or we think about what a mandate of a school council is without doing the relationship building, first of all, right? So think about when you first meet a new friend, or you come to know someone. There's often lots of time where you just chat and you tell your life stories, and you kind of establish who you are with one another, find commonalities. And yet with our meetings, we often go straight to business, right? So I was doing some research on systematic parent engagement at a school here in Saskatoon called Howard Code School, an elementary pre-kindergarten to grade 8. And we had this wonderful grandfather. He walked his grandchild to school every day, and so he was often in the foyer of the school, and we'd set a coffee pot there, just not school council but just school, right? And invited people to linger and have coffee and so on. And Kurt said to me one day, I'm having trouble talking to people. People don't talk to me. I don't know if they don't understand me or what. And there was a lot of diverse women who were bringing their kids to school. And again, there was a difference between, that crossing gender with Muslim, non-Muslim, right? And protocols around that Kurt didn't know or understand. And they were shy about their English and so on. And so he said, I'd really like to mix with people, I just don't know how. And so we started holding some events at the school so that people could learn about one another. And so I had picked this idea up in Australia that I was dying to try. It was called Cooking for Cohesion. And a high school in Queensland, in the state of Queensland, had started to have diverse cultures come together. And they'd have a group cook some food. And while they cooked, they talk about their food, the spices, the smells, the tastes, and so on. But it was a storytelling session. That was the intention. So while they sat together eating, then the idea was that you could tell your story, where you came from, what your journey was like, what it's been like to integrate in this new place, what's working, what isn't. And so we started doing Cooking for Cohesion at Howard Code School, so that one time it was our Syrian families did the cooking. We all got to experience it, participate in it, and then we all sat in the gym on the floor together and had dinner. And they played music and they sang songs and they showed us pictures of their families and they talked about what it was like to escape Syria and so on. Bassam, the one father, had the best English. He did most of the talking. He looked out at the group of people on the floor, sitting on the floor, having eaten, and he said, we've shared a meal together now. You are my family. And there was a woman, Canadian middle class mom, and she had tears running down her face. And she said, I feel a commitment to this family now. I can't even tell you what that feels like, that they're my friends now, they're my family, and I'll be there for them, right? And we did it with then Bangladeshi, we did it with Ethiopian. And it was just that cross-cultural connecting, learning, understanding, coming closer together. And so how can school councils hold those kinds of events or activities so that there's that relationship and trust prior to doing some of the things that are on your agenda, right? So whether it's parent forums or cooking for cohesion or other family kinds of events, what brings people together? What bonds them and connects them? I would love to see school councils take that work on. I think it would just be so powerful because now that I know you, I know your name, I have some history of you, I have no problem coming to you and saying, please come to the next council meeting, right? And you are going to be more likely to come because I was there eating your dinner and talking with you, right? So I don't know, Theresa, I think there's a missing piece. We want to jump right to business.
Yeah.
And I think there's that first piece that also needs to happen.
I think too, when it comes to diversity and different ethnic cultures, is that we need to understand their journey.
Mm.
Sometimes there's the attitude as well, they're lucky to be here in Canada or Ontario or Saskatchewan, wherever, they're lucky to be here in our schools, but we don't understand that their life has changed completely.
Yeah.
That, they may not understand the systems or how to get the best things out of the school system or education system. They might not understand anything other than they have to bring their kid to school.
Yeah.
And we need to really accept that and then find ways. Can we develop some sort of package for newcomers, something that makes them feel welcome and also tries to survey them and get their input on what their journey has been?
Mm-hmm.
So we can, better address it as a school and school council in terms of welcoming them and recognizing that it is a difficult journey often.
Yeah. Do you have in Ontario, we have here something called Welcome Wagon. It's not associated with schools at all, but it's you move into a new neighborhood and Welcome Wagon will come and give you the community newsletter and that kind of do a little bit of a welcome and an orientation. And I've always thought that a gesture like that would be a wonderful school council activity. You have a new family join the school. You put a little basket together that gives them some information, maybe a few little treats, phone numbers, contact, and you go to them and say, we're so glad you're here.
Yeah.
We're your contact people if you need anything, right?
Yeah,
But
we don't have a welcome wagon per se anymore here. Back in the old
we wait for them to come to us. Why aren't we going to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would be a lovely way to welcome new families into the community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And say, like, I'm part of the school council, which means it's just like, a parent group.
Yeah.
Where we get together, discuss the priorities of the school, and we'd love to have your opinion and welcome them and tell them how to get to a meeting, or but at least they feel welcomed.
Yeah.
And that's like 95% of the
Yeah.
steps we need to take.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of your second part, I just think the benefits, I hope that they're obvious to people what the benefits would be. But I think in terms of creating community cohesion, in terms of ensuring representation, when we ensure that we have those diverse voices on council, it's an act of reconciliation, it's an act of equity, and social justice. I think, that it just, to me, that we're going to make better decisions for all kids if all parents have a voice in what those decisions are. And I mean, to me, just the benefits are just sitting right there in front of us, right? And as soon as you meet these amazing people, you just realize how much you have to learn and how much they'll enrich what we know and what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think it's very important. Very important.
mhm.
Adrian, we'll move on. With a split, in Ontario, we have a split between in-person and virtual learnings for students in the same school.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on how to make sure that every parent's aware of updates and communications from the school and the council? And obviously, students bringing home information from school in their backpack will not be.
Gonna help for some of them. Yeah, I mean, in a way, this answer is very similar to my first one, Theresa. We need multiple invitations in multiple ways, right? So we need a diversity of strategies. And again, no one size fits all. We have to be doing it in every way possible. So for some, the paper's still gonna work. I think we can post in community buildings and in businesses in our community that families frequent. We can use those. Do you use them too? The big trailer signs sometimes on the front lawns of school. And then I think teachers are getting more and more skilled all the time at using software apps like Seesaw or Class Dojo or some of those where they're communicating back and forth to families a lot of the time. But they talk about learning with kids and they often don't become allies with us or with administration getting some of this other information to parents. So when parents are used to getting, oh, my phone dinged, here's something from my teacher on Seesaw, how could those common things that are already comfortable in being used be used by teachers too? So that this work isn't always just left to admin or just left to school councils, but is being owned by the whole school body, and teachers are helping to share and disseminate, respond to some of the information too. Some schools are using things like Remind software or there's those kinds of, they might have a school Facebook page, they might have Twitter. We know some of our communities, like I find here, a lot of our new Canadians here are using WhatsApp because that's one that they use. So I think it's really important that we find out what's common for the parents that we have and then use the media and the mediums that are already comfortable for them. But again, there isn't going to be one right answer. We're going to have to blanket it in multiple ways. And again, how do we use our parents to be connections? Like we used to have I'm old, Theresa, in the olden days, we used to have phone trees. Do you know what I mean?
That's right. And I love that. I still think that would be a great idea.
Yeah. So how do we use ideas like that? Mm-hmm. We know personal contact. We know that personal contact is always the very best strategy. So how do we maximize as many people as possible to be making that contact?
And nowadays, I mean, back in the day, you didn't need so much formality around privacy and issues such as that. But I do think that it would be helpful if when schools are asking for permission to use email addresses or phone numbers or whatever, that they include a line that says, may the school council communicate with you in this manner as well.
Yeah.
That gives permission then for the school council, like way back when my kid was in JK, we used to split up the names of parents and their phone numbers, and everybody took, 25 families and made calls. If we had an event coming up, say a math event or a literacy event or whatever, we did the phone tree thing. So I would like to see that. I recognize we need signed protocols these days because of privacy, but I would like to see that as a line in any permission form so that the school council doesn't have to go out and get that permission separately.
Right. Yeah, there's no reason for it to be done twice.
And then there's a suspicion. It's like, well, why are you asking me?
Right.
And I've already given my permission to the school. Like, it starts setting up some doubtful conversation,
Yeah.
where if it's just a line in the permission form that the same permissions being given to the school will be given to the council.
Right, because you are an arm of the school anyway. You are a school body. And so why does it need to be done differently? I think as long as it's explained. And I mean, if there's concerns, we can all do a little bit of privacy training, right? We can do
Yeah.
a little workshop and on confidentiality and privacy and all of that. That's easy,
Yeah.
right? Um, so that, I know that sometimes is raised as a barrier as well, but that's an easy one to overcome in my opinion, right?
I think so too. And I think that, we can always add on to the permission form that the council will operate with the same privacy and security policies as the school,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that they know that they're committed to that privacy and handling of information, and parents don't have to worry that, well, is Ethel gonna give my information to Joan, you
Right,
know?
right.
That you demonstrate right in the permission form that the council is being held to the same privacy standards.
Absolutely. And if there's ever a problem, you deal with the one-off, you deal with the problem. You don't blanket everybody because somebody somewhere once made a mistake, right? Let's operate from a positive place of trust.
Yeah.
And then we'll deal with the problem if it arrives, but we won't work out of a concern for liability or out of a place of fear. Like, I don't think that's ever a healthy beginning, that we don't trust parents and so no one gets this privilege, right? I think
No, and I think too, the spirit of a school council should be that it is a volunteer
Mhm,
situation. People are in a council because they care about the school,
mhm,
care about the kids in the school. So with that as the first kind of face, let's say, to a call or to an email,
mhm,
I would hope the reception would be less threatening
mhm.
and more, people would embrace the call.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think it's just, again, always starting by asking our parents what things work for you, and then seeing what they're comfortable with, what they have access to in technology and so on, and then using that. Sometimes we have people who don't have minutes on their phone or don't have data packages and so on. And so we need that information, and then we can tailor the ways in which we communicate and connect according to what supports them in the structures that they have in place for them. So
I think that's really an important point, because you may have parents who don't have access to devices.
right.
But if they can identify to the school that they don't have a device, but they would like to be part of a virtual conversation, they can set up a learning agreement, a sort of a lending agreement with the school
Yeah.
to get a device for that day so they can take part. And I think we have to really embrace and try to get that information from parents so they know we're doing everything we can to make them part of the school community.
That's the thing. And I think we often make assumptions and we don't know what the case is for some of our families. And that's why that spending time, whether you do it community canvas or how you do it, but learn what the context is. And then we're smart people. We can address the issues if we know what they are. And we have lots of resources through school divisions or other organizations that we could seek if families need them, right?
And I think we have to also, one of the things, I attended a talking circle at Curve Lake First Nations. And one of the things that I got out of that experience was how simplistic it was.
Mhm.
We didn't worry about, well, what if this happened, or what if she said that, or they said that, or they did that, and we need 16 policies around this. Everybody was comfortable to just share.
Mhm.
If a question was asked, everybody felt comfortable to give their input. And, we didn't need big policies of who speaks first, who's doing this, there was just a sense of community
Yeah.
in
The
the circle.
teachings those circle teachings are just so rich and so beautiful. And that idea that we all sit at the same level in a circle. And
Mhm.
isn't that really what we want? That your voice is just as important as mine, as Ishika's, and so on, right? Because we're all, when it's our turn, our voice, we all relax and listen, right? To that voice. So I think we have so much we could learn from Indigenous perspectives and Indigenous worldviews if we humble ourselves to do that learning,
Yeah.
right?
And you know, one thing they are very good at is listening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
People sat back, they took a breath, you know, and
mm-hmm.
they respected the input that was being given.
Yeah, yeah, they have a different respect for silence
Yeah.
than we do. And again, I know something I can learn from, something probably all of us can learn something from. And then the agenda just unfolds organically because as people speak, it becomes the agenda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's probably other ways to learn from that as well. But I think always knowing our families, always hearing from them is a good beginning for any of the work that we're going to do.
I so agree. And I think also, like, you know, we tended to host things like math nights, literacy nights, things like that, and say, you know, parents should be engaged and why don't they come out? And, you know, attendance is typically low for many of these events, especially in lower income communities. And I think maybe the question is why, you know, are you able to attend first?
Mm-hmm.
Second, here's what we'll be doing. If
Yeah.
we give you the tools to do it at home as a family, would that be helpful to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because we understand you can't come in for this event or
Right.
whatever, you know?
Yeah.
We don't do that. We just immediately assume they're not interested.
Well, and I think we decide, you know, it's the point I've been making. We decide too much for people, right? Like I sit in my little place in my circle and I think it would be good for parents too. Well, who am I to make that decision, right? And so I think let's ask and then let's provide what they've asked for. So if I come to you and say, Theresa, I'm really wanting to learn more about X, when you offer that session, I don't feel embarrassed to attend. I don't feel put down because I'm going, right? Like I asked for it and you're providing it. But when you hold the session that talks to me about lice, when you hold the session that tells me how to read to my kids, I feel a little bit offended at times, or I feel a little bit of put down at times, right? That you don't know that I already read to my kids every day,
Yeah.
right? And so I think we have to be careful. There isn't this sense that what we're providing is because parents need it, but
Yes.
what we're providing is because parents asked for it.
And
And
I
to
think
me,
that,
those are two super different things.
yes. And I love that to always take out the word should.
Yeah,
If we
yeah.
can take out that word,
Mm-hmm.
we can put it like could. How could we do this? You know, when we had literacy nights, I always said, this isn't telling parents they should read. Let's give them some fun ways to
Yeah,
interact with their child when they do read.
yeah.
Let's assume they read.
Yeah, and let's start our session by saying, tell us all the ways you read to your kids at home now. Oh, I read when they're in the bathtub. We read, you know, I recite stories or poems in the car when we drive or whatever. Let's first find out what they know
Mhm.
and what they do, and then let's honor that and then add to it. But let's not assume there's no wealth of knowledge there already, right?
Yeah, I so agree with that. I so
Yeah,
agree with that.
yeah.
The next slide, Adrian. What can each person who's joined us tonight do to engage one other parent or caregiver and share the value of being engaged in their children's education?
Yeah. Talk about it. Talk about it all the time, right? I don't know that it's a topic that's discussed as much as it could be. Tell your stories of your own engagement. Tell your stories of your connections to the school. Tell your stories of your connections with your child's teacher. Make it visible. Make it part of what's important and what we do. Share facts, just simple facts. Did you know that when you're doing this with your kids, it makes a difference in this way? Like, do we have short little bullet points that are impactful? so that parents will say, wow, there's something to this. One of my doctoral students a few years ago, Lee Murray, was in nursing, and she was looking at kids who'd been sexually abused in school. That was the topic of her work. But within that body of work, she said, 100 cases is a statistic, 1 case is a tragedy, right? So when we're talking with families, when we're talking about parent engagement, I think that's a good rule of thumb. How do we tell a story that shows the impact for a child, for a parent, for a teacher, and gets sort of in somebody's heart, right? So that they see a purpose and a place for them in a way that's important. We have an organization here in Saskatchewan called the Saskatchewan Literacy Network. Have a look at them on Twitter. They've been having this campaign started, I don't know if it started pre-COVID, I sure was attentive to it during COVID. Beautifully done, has a gorgeous photo. It will have just a couple of words on that photo. So for example, there might be a parent engaged in reading with their child, and it might say, read every day. Or it might say, have a parent out collecting rocks or looking at rocks with a child, and it will say, collect rocks, like words like read, play, have a treasure hunt, right? Like just really simple, very family-centric kinds of things. And then the tweet would say, you know, today's National Reading Day, have you read a book to your child today, kind of a thing. Super powerful messaging. So I'd encourage everyone to have a look at it. I think they did a magnificent job. And how do we capture something like that in our messaging too? So what could a school council do? What could a school do to put these affective, like when I see, you know, that picture, this beautiful picture of a parent out looking at rocks with the kids, like I wish my boys were little again, because I want to go do that, right? It's really motivating. And so, you know, how could we do, you know, some short, snappy, really good teaching as well. I think we need to, you know, have book clubs about parent engagement and share an article, share a chapter from a book, share a short little piece that you saw somewhere and talk about it. How do we do conversation circles or play groups where we're talking about what we do with our kids, you know, different things, different age groups, shoulder tap people, right? You know, just all of those things, make it personal, make it quick and snappy, make it meaningful, touch people's heart with it, make it a part of the conversation.
Because I think one of the things too that I always found is when you say to parent, you know, when parents are talking about being engaged in their children's education, you see, you know, if you said all the people who are engaged in your children's education step forward, you know, you might see 10 out of 100 people step forward because they interpret being engaged, meaning they know the curriculum, they can do homework help with their children, they attend events at school, you know, all of that. We need to really shift our thinking about engagement.
Yeah.
And
did you bake cookies with your child this week? Did you walk your dog outside this week? Did you? That's engagement. And that's the messaging, right? Theresa, how do we create this sense of what engagement actually is?
Engagement is patting them on the back as they go out the door and say, you're going to be great today.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to hear how your day's going to go. That's engagement. It's inspiring them. It's encouraging them. It's letting them know you're proud of them. It doesn't mean you know the new math curriculum.
No, exactly. And the fact is, to me, one of the things that I think is really important that teachers and parents understand is that parent engagement, it has a word parent in it. When I'm engaged, parent engagement, I'm engaged as a parent, not as a pretend teacher.
Yes.
Parent engagement isn't about helping my kid do his grade 8 math. It isn't about looking to see what's in his backpack today. Parent engagement is chatting with him about who he would vote for if he was able to vote at this point in time. It's talking about what he wants to be when he grows up. It's talking about what he's going to do on the weekend. It's talking about how he solved a problem. It's talking about how he's organizing for his science fair project, right? So we stay in that place of parent, and that's, you know, I know parents will say, I cannot go to another meeting, or I can't sign up for another job. Yeah, but you can do math with your kids while you make cookies. You can,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, do math with your kids while you plant the garden.
Cards, or write the cards, or
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't a grandparent love to get a card written by their grandchild instead of their
Oh, yeah. And so I think it's helping people even know what it is and then know why it matters, right?
I think that's one of our biggest struggles, is breaking down that vision of what an engaged parent is. Because it's not only more beneficial for people to realize that you don't have to be a teacher to be an engaged parent in your children's education.
Right.
But also it breaks down the intimidation that some parents don't feel they can be involved.
Yeah.
Because they don't know. They didn't go to university. They may not have finished high school. They don't, you know.
Doesn't matter.
No, and really, I think that's our job right now, is to redefine what parent engagement is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, I think, will take away the intimidation for so many to feel successful as an engaged parent.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling, I think there's so many who just go, well, I'm not really engaged because, like, I don't even know the math curriculum.
Right.
We really
no matter what we do, I think that when we touch the lives of parents, we want them to come away feeling stronger, feeling, you know, more empowered. And so that's a question, that a measure for us, right? Did this session, did this offering, did this meeting cause that person to feel bigger, right? To feel lifted. And that's our bottom line always. And did we affirm everyone in our circle today, right? Did everyone leave going, I'm doing some good stuff as a mom or a dad or a grandma or a grandpa, even though I know there's days that there's stuff I don't do great, right? But
and I think that, you know, it's so important, especially in the more challenged communities, to do everything we can to give them positive feelings about, you know, how they're raising their kid, how they're involved with their kid, you know, to assist them and raise them up. Because we will never change the generational attitude if we don't take that step to help empower them.
Yeah, I think it's a good piece. I've had this privilege of working with groups of graduate students since 2010, and one of the groups, I think it was the fourth one, Parent Engagement Collaborative 4 that I worked with, we hosted a parent engagement forum, and we called ourselves Walk Alongside. But one of the things that we started with that group was this expression, wanting to create a gentle revolution. And so that's kind of what this is all about, is educating with kindness, with care, by honoring people, by honoring teachers and schools, but still pushing for change. And when you write down the word revolution, it's REVOL. So when you put those letters EVOL in another color and you read them backwards, it's got the word love in it, right? So we want to change the world. We want to change how things happen in schools for parents, for kids, but with love and kindness, with respect for one another, all moving forward together, not tension against one another, right?
Yes.
And so to me, what we want to do, you know, what can we do, you know, in terms of this evening's session? Join the gentle revolution, be a part of it, be pushing in kind and caring and informed ways for parent voice and place, for things to be different than they've been, for new possibilities, for more inclusion. I think each one of us can be, if you want, a warrior in that revolution, right? And that's I hope what happens. So, you know, joining Twitter, you know, having a voice in Facebook dialogue, whatever suits you is your contribution, and it matters, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Adrian, we're going to move on, I think, to questions in the chat. So we have a couple of questions that have come in.
Okay.
One from Andrea. Do I feel comfortable coming in? Andrea, if you can unmute, I think, are you referring to council meetings? Do you feel comfortable? Oh, maybe she's left the meeting. Okay.
No, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Hi,
I was just,
Andrea.
that was a comment I was just making in terms of something that Debbie was saying at the time, just around that whole idea of when we're offering things to parents, I guess, are we making sure that, first of all, parents feel welcome to come in, and that when they do come in, that we've created a space where they feel comfortable to be in. So that was, I was just kind of making that comment in regards to something Debbie said, like kind of agreeing, I guess, what she said. So it wasn't really a question.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's all.
Andrea, you've got some really good experience with this. Do you have, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but any examples that you might want to share? Because I know you're really awake to that work, to that ensuring people feel comfortable. So anything to share around that, experiences, stories, maybe?
I'm just thinking, I don't know. I'm kind of on the,
I'm sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. That's all right. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking, was just that idea of how, like a lot of times, the best parent engagement that you can have is not anything that's scripted.
Yeah.
It's not a program that you do. It's not an activity that you do. It's those conversations that you have.
Yeah.
And building relationships. I mean, and it sounds corny or it sounds so simple, but it's just the most powerful thing I found, like as a teacher, just being able to have conversations with people, and just, when the parent walks in and you feel like, that they feel welcome and you have a good relationship with them, and it has nothing to do with their child's education. It has nothing to do with what you've done in math today or what you've done. It has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with the relationship that you have. How's it going? How's your mother? I heard your brother your brother's doing this, or uncle's doing this, or how are things with you? I find that is powerful, and it's probably the best way to engage with parents and to bring them in.
I love that, Andrea.
Here's one little story I had. One parent,
thank you.
he was a little, perhaps, I'll make it fast. He was a little perhaps rough around the edges, but I just saw him as a person, and I treated him the same. Like, he would come in and I'd say, hey, how's your mom? How's this? Or how's, and we had such a wonderful relationship. And there was a call put out in the school because of a suspicious person. That we had like a lockdown because of a suspicious person.
Yeah.
And well, it wasn't really a lockdown, but I got a call saying there's this suspicious person and they're coming up to your classroom. So, close the door and da da da. So I took a peek out to see who, and it was this parent. So, and I just started laughing because he was not dangerous in the least, but it was part of just, we had a great relationship, and I still see him to this day out in the community at the odd times. And,
Nice.
So that relationship is just, it's so important, and it's key to engaging parents and making them partners with you.
Yeah. What a great story, Andrea. Thanks for sharing that.
That's great. I have a question from Amanda. Okay. Do you have any suggestions for councils to reach out virtually this year? Online fundraisers and other ways to engage parents who are online only, so they're not coming into the physical school.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that same sense of how do you make a connection, right? Mm-hmm. So think about the kinds of things you do to make a connection, like Andrea's talked about with face-to-face. How can you make a connection virtually, right? So again, it may be that you're not going door to door, face to face, but maybe I'm trying to set up, you know, can I give you a call at 6 o'clock and just talk with you, or so on, and using whatever medium that works for that parents. I think it's always still about relationships first, building connections and relationships. So there's some sense of why would we want to engage, right?
Yeah.
Does that help with that? Do you want to follow up on that question anymore or respond?
Are you there, Amanda? Okay, I think she's choosing not to unmute. But one of the things I do want to stress is I don't believe that fundraising should be the main topic of anything. And I definitely do not think it's a way to engage parents.
I think what we have to be really clear about is fundraising is not parent engagement, it's parent involvement, and that's a whole different ballgame. And a lot of parents, the minute we ask for them to fundraise, we lose them.
Yeah.
So we really have to look at it comes back to what we were just saying. What is engagement? What does that look like? And how do we promote it? And the reason we want to promote engagement rather than involvement is because the research is very clear that parent engagement enhances students' outcomes. Parent involvement does not. So we're putting time and energy into something and we're not getting results as a result of it. And
perhaps we should break that down, Debbie, like the difference, because I'm sure some people are going to say, I don't understand the difference.
Yeah. So involvement is a warm body activity. That's the way I put it in really simple lay language. So when you ask me to fundraise, when you ask me to mix paint, when you ask me to come on a field trip with you, when you ask me to cut things out or photocopy them, work in the canteen, any person who's capable could do that. They don't have to be a parent. Those are just support activities so the school can reach their agenda to do what they want to do. Engagement is when we use parents' knowledge of their children or how their children learn, of their family, of their culture or context, to help us do a better job teaching them, or engagement in their kids' teaching and learning at home. So like I said, when they're baking cookies, they're learning science, they're learning math, they're building relationships, they're using oral language, they're reading, they might be drawing, they're all those kinds of things. That promotes learning and it uses parents' knowledge. So is that helping? So I think we really have to clear that line.
Yes.
The other problem I have with fundraising is it creates inequity.
Yes.
So when I'm in this upper class neighborhood, we can raise thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars for our kids' education. When we're in a community that is socioeconomically challenged, they can raise $5.
Yeah.
And so how does that create an equitable public education system?
Yes.
So there's other issues of equity around fundraising that aren't even about parent engagement or parent involvement, but they're equity issues that are also important to us, and I think also important for us to consider.
I so agree with that. Like when we talked about to address the issue of other ways to engage parents online, it comes back to that the engagement has to offer them value.
Yes.
And just saying, you know, you can go to Mabel's Labels and we can make 10% off your order.
Right.
That's not engagement.
No.
That's a guilt trip.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that the pressure that's put on families, and let's deal with the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
Many families, you know, one or more parents have lost their job, or they're struggling to pay their bills for whatever reason might present itself. And I just think that there should be no focus on fundraising right now.
Yeah.
That what we should be looking at is what do families need in our school, and how can we help accommodate that?
Yeah. So we want to be having conversations with parents about what they're doing to alleviate kids' anxiety, or what they're doing to support their kids developing reading, or what they're doing to promote a sense of social consciousness or whatever, right? Like what are the things that parents are really concerned about with their kids right now? And how do we virtually then engage in conversations, provide speakers, provide resources in order to address the things that parents tell us are important to them, not the things that we want to do for some other purpose.
And most school boards have within their structure experts on many of these areas.
Yeah, yeah.
School safety, school bus safety. Right now, of course, you can get public health to come on as a speaker. I mean, there's all kinds of value you can add online.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you can post online as we do, take these off to a YouTube channel so that parents have constant access to it. So it's not like, well, I couldn't attend tonight's session and now I feel I missed out.
Well, in one of the schools in Martinsville, which is a small community just outside of the city of Saskatoon where I live, in that high school, they did a Tell Them For Me survey, and the students identified high levels of anxiety. And so the teachers and the parents got together and said, okay, this is kind of new territory for all of us. So what might we want to do to address this? And together, teachers and parents planned for a panel, for some speakers, kids speaking, parents speaking. They brought in specialists. They did a book club, I believe. But it became the work. It became the kind of number one priority of the school council, was to lead and facilitate this kind of conversation, right? And they did it together with the staff in response to what parents said mattered to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how we get people to join us, whether it's in person or virtually, is do something that's important to them.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that's always the key.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions we have. If you have any more, you can put them into the chat and we will come back to them and answer any that come in after we close this session on our Facebook page. And you can check there for our answers, and I will send whatever questions, if you don't mind, Debbie, I will send them off to you.
Sure.
And we can compile an answer and post it.
Wonderful.
So I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time tonight to join us for this important conversation. And tonight's virtual session will be posted on our YouTube channel for future viewing. Oh, we just got a question. So we'll just do this one and then we'll close out for tonight. We struggle with getting information out to parents in the mode that best suits their needs. Some of our council members are from families whose children are doing full remote learning. We know that paper will get home to all families, all the mails, emails, etc., and social media can be overwhelming and get overlooked. Any suggestions for what we can do? And this is from Thames Valley School Board.
Okay. I mean, I think it's again that asking parents what they want, how they want to be communicated with, and then doing that. So it might mean that some people get paper, some people get a text message, some people read what's on the Facebook page. There isn't a right answer. And so we, just like we do with our kids, right? As I said earlier, tailor what you're giving them based on what they need. Maybe it takes a bit more effort, but once you have your message, you're just putting it into different formats. The message stays the same. But I think just like in my classroom, I'll have kids reading at a grade 3 level and kids reading at a grade 1 level. I don't give them the same book. So that we have to do that with our families too. And I think that's our responsibility to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to thank you for your time tonight, Dr. Pushor. It's been a very interesting conversation. And I hope that really would like to see Canada have a national strategy on parent engagement.
I'd love it too.
And certainly a national conversation, and maybe that's something you and I can explore in the future.
Sure.
But I'd really like to thank you for your time. It's been an important session for parents, I'm sure. And we are going to have another session in a couple of weeks virtually with a new topic or presenter. So I'd like to thank everybody for participating tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Theresa. I'm really honored to be part of the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take
You're all
care.
set for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.